I stared at the pieces of my life, scattered like shards of glass I once believed unbreakable. My name is Jeff Baker, and I'm 33 years old. These days, I wake up alone in the house I fought to keep, drinking coffee on the porch while reviewing legal documents. My wife Vicky, the woman who vowed to stand beside me, spent years constructing an elaborate betrayal with her lover Joseph, while her friends Pearl and Celeste cheered from the sidelines. My hands trembled when I first discovered the truth, but I forced them steady. I refused to become what they expected, a helpless victim blindsided by their calculated deception. The evidence I gathered became my shield and sword in equal measure, transforming private humiliation into public accountability. Everyone deserves to know when they've been wronged, and everyone has the right to ensure justice follows. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. But let me start from the beginning. Morning light streamed through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the granite countertop I'd installed 2 summers ago. I cracked eggs into a bowl, whisking them with mechanical precision while listening to Vicky's footsteps pad down the stairs. My muscles were tight, my jaw clenched so hard it ached, but my hands remained steady. The betrayal from last night echoed in my ears, her drunk, careless laughter mixing with Pearl and Celeste's howls as they mocked my ignorance. Vicky shuffled into the kitchen, hair disheveled, wrapped in that gray bathrobe I'd given her for Christmas 3 years back. Her eyes were puffy, too much wine with the girls. But there was something else there, a smugness, a secret satisfaction that I'd never noticed before. Amazing what you can see when the blindfold comes off. "Morning," she mumbled, reaching for the coffee pot. She poured a cup, added too much sugar like always, and leaned against the counter. I slid the eggs onto 2 plates, added some toast. "Sleep okay?" I asked, my voice surprisingly level. She nodded, scrolling through her phone. The same phone that had broadcast her betrayal just hours before. I waited until she'd taken a few bites, until the kitchen felt like it was just ours again. Remember those Sunday mornings when we'd make pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse? When the biggest problem was whether we wanted to see a movie or go hiking? Those days felt like artifacts from someone else's life now. "Rough night?" I finally asked, watching her face for any flicker of recognition. Vicky shrugged, not looking up from her phone. "Just girl talk." She took another sip of coffee, casual as could be. Girl talk, right. I'd heard what girl talk meant now. I nodded, took a breath, and reached for my phone. Without saying another word, I slid it across the counter toward her, the voice memo app open and recording. The red circle pulsed like a warning light. "Say it, Vicky!" Her eyes darted from the phone to my face, confusion morphing into understanding, then anger. "What are you doing?" "I heard you last night." On speaker with Pearl and Celeste. I kept my voice flat, controlled. "You said I was too stupid to notice you've been cheating for years." Her face flushed crimson, but instead of guilt, I saw fury. "God, Jeff, you're so paranoid." Her voice rose sharply. "Were you spying on me?" "Am I?" I asked. "Paranoid? Because I remember exactly what you said. I vented. I was drunk." She pushed her plate away. "You never listened to me." "I'm listening now." I folded my arms, feeling something hardening inside me. "Tell me about the cheating, Vicky." "This is ridiculous." She stood up, coffee forgotten. "You don't make me feel wanted anymore. You're always working, always distracted." "I paid for the Mexico trip and your pottery classes," I countered. "You picked distance, not me." "I picked happiness," she snapped, eyes blazing. "Something you couldn't give me." "And this mystery man can?" She grabbed her phone, clutching it to her chest. "You'll never prove anything." "I don't have to," I told her, nodding toward my phone still recording on the counter. "If you put it in your own words." We stood there, the kitchen suddenly too small, the air between us charged with years of what I now realized were carefully constructed lies. Her rage matched mine, but while hers exploded outward, mine burned inward, fueling a cold determination I hadn't known I possessed. "This conversation is over," she finally said, turning away. "I'm going to shower." I watched her stomp upstairs, listened to the bathroom door slam and the shower turn on. Only then did I let out the breath I'd been holding. Her tablet sat on the counter, forgotten in her haste to escape. The same tablet we shared because why waste money on 2? I picked it up, knowing she never logged out. She never thought she needed to. It didn't take long to find them, Message chains with Pearl and Celeste, full of inside jokes about their nights out, about keeping secrets. Hotel receipts neatly labeled as business expenses. Calendar entries with innocuous titles that coincided with nights she'd told me she was working late. And then a name, Joseph. Joseph from her office. Joseph, who she'd mentioned casually as harmless and just a colleague. Joseph, whose name appeared in email after email, in transaction records, even in notes about a separate account at some credit union across town. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at that name, feeling the floor tilt beneath me for the second time in less than 24 hours. The shower upstairs was still running. She probably thought I was still sitting there, wounded and confused, waiting for her to come down and gaslight me into an apology. But confusion was burning away like morning fog, leaving only clarity in its wake. I waited until Vicky left for work before I really dug in. The house felt different now, every familiar corner suddenly suspect. Had they been here, in our home? I pushed the thought away and focused on the task at hand. The tablet was a goldmine. Vicky had always been organized about money, something I once admired. Now that precision created a perfect paper trail. I pulled up our joint bank statements on my laptop and lined them up against her emails, receipts, and calendar. A pattern emerged. Every conference or team dinner matched a hotel charge or restaurant bill too expensive for work. But what really caught my eye were the transfers, small enough to fly under the radar, regular enough to add up. 200 here, 300 there, always on paydays, always to the same account. Community First Credit Union, I muttered, writing it down. Not our bank. A place I'd never heard of. By afternoon, I'd found statements from this mystery account, neatly labeled in her email as CF Budget. And there it was, both their names. Victoria Baker and Joseph Ryerson, joint account holders since January, 18 months ago, while I was planning our anniversary trip. My hand shook as I scrolled through their transactions. Weekend getaways labeled as R&R, a watch purchase listed as gift, dinner reservations, and wine club memberships. They'd built a whole life with my overtime pay. Remember when Vicky insisted we needed that joint account for better interest rates? The memory hit me like a truck. I'd deposited my bonuses there, believing we were building something together. The familiar sound of the garage door jerked me back to reality. I quickly closed everything, cleared the browser history, and put the tablet back exactly where she'd left it. By the time Vicky walked in, I was casually scrolling through my phone at the kitchen island. "Hey," I said, not looking up. "Thought we might order in tonight. Thai food, maybe?" She seemed thrown by my normal tone, hesitating before setting down her purse. "Oh, actually, I have to go back to the office. End of quarter reports." End of quarter was 3 weeks ago. I nodded anyway. "No problem. How late you thinking?" "Hard to say. Don't wait up." She headed upstairs, and minutes later, the shower started again. When she came down, she'd changed into a dress I hadn't seen before. Her perfume hit me from across the room, heavier than what she wore to work. Classy enough for dinner, casual enough for drinks after. "You look nice for spreadsheets," I commented, testing the waters. "The team's getting dinner first." She didn't meet my eyes. "Morale thing," I nodded. "Drive safe." As her car backed out of the garage, I grabbed my keys and almost followed her. The impulse was overwhelming. Catch her in the act, create a scene, make them both face what they'd done. I even made it halfway down the block before pulling over. No, that wasn't the way. One explosive confrontation would give her the upper hand. Poor, unstable Jeff, acting crazy and making accusations. I needed more than just knowledge. I needed leverage. I turned around and drove in the opposite direction, pulling into a coffee shop parking lot. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name Dana Walsh. We'd met at a neighbor's barbecue last summer, a family attorney who'd handled my coworker's divorce. She'd struck me as sharp, methodical, and utterly without drama. She answered on the third ring. "Dana Walsh speaking." "Dana, it's Jeff Baker from the neighbor's barbecue last year." My voice sounded strangely steady. "I need legal advice. Divorce territory. Are you taking clients?" There was a slight pause. "I am. How urgent is your situation?" "Very, but I'm not looking to file tomorrow. I need strategy first." "I have time tomorrow afternoon. My office, 3 o'clock? I'll be there." "Thank you." Back home, I moved through the evening in a strange fog, ordering dinner I barely tasted. When Vicky finally returned around 11, her cheeks were flushed and her eyes bright. She kicked off her heels by the door. "Good meeting?" I asked mildly. She startled slightly. Oh, yeah, productive. She set her purse down carefully. You didn't have to wait up. Couldn't sleep? I shrugged. You hungry? There's leftover pad thai. No, the team ordered something. She seemed uncertain now, watching me for any sign of suspicion. I just nodded and headed upstairs, refusing to give her the fight she was fishing for. Behind me, I heard her sigh with what sounded like relief. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Vicky in the bathroom. The shower running again, washing away evidence? The thought made me sick. When she finally slid into bed, she kept to her side, tapping away at her phone, the blue light illuminating her small smile. 3 feet of mattress between us might as well have been miles. I closed my eyes and practiced my breathing, rehearsing how long I could keep this up, this performance of normalcy while everything collapsed around me. Tomorrow, I'd see Dana. Tomorrow, I'd start building my case. I woke up before Vicky the next morning, my mind already churning with plans. After my meeting with Dana yesterday, one thing became crystal clear. I needed to document everything. Evidence is king in family court, Dana had told me, her voice matter-of-fact as she slid a legal pad across her desk. Text messages, photos, receipts, anything that establishes a pattern. While Vicky was in the shower, I placed an Amazon order for a Ring doorbell camera, express shipping. It would arrive tomorrow. When she came downstairs in her work clothes, I was already dressed and pouring coffee. "You're up early," she commented, eyeing me suspiciously. I shrugged. "Big project at work. Thought I'd get a head start." She seemed to accept this, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. It struck me how easily we'd slipped into these roles. Her, the suspicious one watching for cracks in my facade. Me, the oblivious husband carrying on as normal. The Ring camera arrived the next afternoon. I waited until Vicky got home to install it, making sure she saw me unboxing it. "What's that for?" she asked, setting down her purse. "Security upgrade," I said casually. "The Martins down the street had some packages stolen. Figured it wouldn't hurt to have video of our front door." She nodded, seemingly uninterested. "Good idea, I guess." I felt her eyes on me as I mounted the device next to our front door, connecting it to our home Wi-Fi. Little did she know I was creating a separate account she wouldn't have access to, one that would back up all footage to the cloud automatically. "Should help with package deliveries too," I added, keeping my tone light. "No more missing those online orders." Over the next several days, the camera became my silent witness. I watched the footage each night after Vicky fell asleep, documenting the patterns that emerged. Wednesday evening, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from Ring. I opened it to see Joseph's silver Audi pulling up to our curb at 7:43 p.m. The timestamp glowed accusingly on my screen. Just 30 minutes earlier, Vicky had texted me, "Having drinks with Pearl after work. Don't wait up." I watched as she hurried out to his car, glancing around furtively before getting in. They drove off together. The camera caught them returning at 11:17 p.m. Joseph didn't get out, just idled, while Vicky slipped back inside. I saved the footage, added it to the growing folder in my secure cloud drive, and went back to pretending I was asleep when she crept into bed. At Dana's recommendation, I visited Hector Schaefer the following week. His office was sparse, just a desk, 2 chairs, and filing cabinets lining the walls. The man himself matched his surroundings. No nonsense, economical with words, his salt and pepper hair cropped close. "I need surveillance," I explained, sliding him the printed photos of Joseph from Vicky's social media and his company profile. "This man and my wife. I need documentation of their meetings." Hector nodded, examining the photos. "Timeline?" "As soon as possible. 2 weeks of observation should do it." He quoted me his rate. It wasn't cheap, but Dana had warned me. Doing this right would cost money up front, but save me much more in the long run. "I'll need an advance," Hector said. I wrote him a check from my personal account, one Vicky couldn't access. 10 days later, Hector called. "I've got what you need. Come by tomorrow." The manila envelope he handed me the next day contained dozens of photos, each with timestamps and locations noted in precise handwriting. Joseph and Vicky entering a condo building together, leaving a restaurant with his arm around her waist, kissing in his car outside her office. "The condo belongs to a coworker who's out of town," Hector explained. "They've used it 3 times in the past week, always between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. I felt simultaneously numb and on fire as I flipped through the photos. "This is thorough." "That's what you're paying for," Hector replied simply. Dana added Hector's photos to the growing binder of evidence, a meticulously organized record of betrayal. Hotel receipts matched to business trips, text messages, bank statements showing transfers to their joint credit union account, timeline of absences that contradicted Vicky's explanations. "We're building a solid case," Dana assured me, tapping the binder. "When the time comes, this will speak for itself." That Sunday, I invited Vicky's parents over for dinner, not because I wanted to, but because maintaining appearances was part of the plan. Melanie and Tom arrived at 6, bearing a bottle of wine and forced smiles. The conversation around the table was strained. Weather, Tom's garden, Melanie's book club. No one mentioned the obvious tension. Finally, as I served the meatloaf, Melanie set down her fork and looked between Vicky and me. "You two seem far," she said softly. Vicky rolled her eyes. "Mom, please." I met Melanie's concerned gaze as I reached for the gravy boat. "Some distances are measured in decibels," I said, pouring gravy over my potatoes. Vicky shot me a sharp glance across the table. I returned her look with a bland smile, knowing the evidence binder waited in my briefcase upstairs, ready when I was. The mediator's office felt too warm, like someone had cranked the heat to make us all uncomfortable. Dana sat beside me, her navy suit crisp and unwrinkled despite the stuffy room. Across the polished oak table, Vicky had dressed for performance. Cream blouse, hair freshly highlighted, makeup perfect. Her attorney, Kurt, wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Let's begin," the mediator said, her voice neutral as Switzerland. Kurt leaned forward first. "My client is seeking equitable distribution of marital assets, with consideration for her contributions to the household. The marital home should remain with her, as Mr. Baker's work schedule makes him rarely present." Dana cleared her throat. "If I may." She placed her hands on the binder in front of her, the one we'd spent weeks assembling. "Before we continue with assertions, I'd like to introduce some relevant facts." Kurt's smile was all teeth. "By all means." I watched Dana's hands, steady, methodical, as she slid the 3-inch binder across the table. The sound it made was subtle but deliberate, like chess pieces being positioned before checkmate. "This documentation speaks for itself," she said. Kurt flipped open the cover with the casual flick of someone who'd seen it all. His confidence lasted exactly 3 seconds, the time it took him to register the tab labeled Affair and the first of Hector's photographs. His expression shifted from smug to concerned in the span of a heartbeat. Vicky leaned over to see what had silenced her attorney. The color drained from her face, then rushed back in a crimson flood. "These are," Kurt began. "Time-stamped surveillance photographs," Dana finished for him, "along with bank records, hotel receipts, and documented timeline inconsistencies. There are also records of transfers to a joint account at Community First Credit Union, held by Mrs. Baker and a Mr. Joseph Ryerson." Vicky's eyes darted to me, searching for something. Anger, hurt, something she could manipulate. I kept my face blank, the way I had for weeks now. The table between us might as well have been a mile wide. "If you'll turn to tab 4, Dana continued, "you'll find detailed evidence of financial impropriety." Kurt flipped pages rapidly, then leaned over to whisper urgently in Vicky's ear. Her hand came up to cover her mouth. "In light of these discoveries," Dana said to the mediator, "we seek exclusive use of the home pending sale or buyout and protective orders regarding the credit union account that contains marital funds. Mrs. Baker's conduct constitutes dissipation of assets under state statute." The mediator nodded, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes sharp. Kurt whispered more frantically to Vicky, who nodded stiffly, her gaze locked on the binder as if it were a bomb about to detonate. "We'll need time to review this information," Kurt said finally. "Of course," Dana replied, "but the temporary orders hearing is scheduled for Thursday. I trust we can reach agreement on these basic issues before then." The rest of the mediation proceeded like watching someone deflate, Vicky and Kurt retreating from demand to demand. By the time we stood to leave, we had a tentative framework. I would retain primary use of the house, the credit union account would be frozen pending further investigation, and we would return to court Thursday to formalize everything. For the first time since that night with the laundry basket, I felt like I could breathe. That evening, I sat alone on my back porch with a cold beer. The yard lights cast long shadows across the grass I'd meticulously maintained for years. The bottle was cold against my palm, condensation dripping between my fingers. It didn't feel like defeat anymore. It felt like possibility. 2 days later, I was reviewing work emails when a knock at the door interrupted me. A sheriff's deputy stood on my porch, expression professionally blank. "Jeffrey Baker?" "That's me." He handed me a stack of papers. "You've been served with an ex parte restraining order. You need to vacate the premises immediately." I scanned the documents, my stomach plummeting. Vicky claimed I had cornered her after mediation, made her fear for her safety. The judge had signed a temporary order requiring me to leave my home for 10 days, until a hearing could be held. "Sir, I need to see you gather some belongings and exit the property," the deputy said. I called Dana immediately. Her voice was tight when she answered. "I just got the notice. This is a tactic, Jeff. Don't engage. Pack your things. We'll fight it in court." I pulled my duffel bag from the closet and stuffed in whatever clothes I could grab. Toothbrush, razor, laptop. The door to our bedroom opened, and Vicky stood there, arms folded across her chest. Her smile was small but unmistakable. "You should have left well enough alone," she hissed. I zipped the bag and stood straight. The home we'd painted together, furnished together, was suddenly hostile territory. I looked at the walls I'd painted with my own hands and said, "I'm leaving so you don't have to." The door shut behind me like a verdict. I hauled my duffel up the 3 flights to Luke's apartment, each step heavier than the last. When he opened the door, his expression shifted from confusion to concern. "Jeff? What's going on, man?" "Vicky got a restraining order. I'm officially homeless." My voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. Luke's eyes widened. "What? That's insane." He stepped aside, gesturing me in. "Mi casa and all that? The couch is yours as long as you need it." His apartment was bachelor basic. Sports memorabilia on the walls, dishes in the sink, but clean enough. The couch was worn but comfortable, with a throw blanket draped over one arm. "Thanks," I said, dropping my bag. "I wouldn't ask, but don't even start with that." Luke cut me off. "Remember sophomore year when my car died and you drove me to work for 3 weeks? We're good." He grabbed 2 beers from the fridge and handed me one. I took a long pull, the cold liquid doing nothing to ease the knot in my stomach. "She's trying to make me look unstable," I said finally. "Make me the bad guy. That's messed up." Luke shook his head. "So, what's the plan?" "Court. Thursday." That night, I lay on Luke's couch staring at the ceiling, the unfamiliar shadows making sleep impossible. The humiliation was the point, I realized. Vicky wanted me rattled, desperate, emotional, anything that would make me look unhinged in front of a judge. She'd calculated everything, the timing, the false accusations, even the public spectacle of being escorted from my own home. Remember that summer barbecue when we first moved in? The neighbors bringing welcome gifts, Vicky's arm linked through mine like we were inseparable. Now I was the guy who got kicked out, the husband with issues. At 6:30 a.m., I called Dana. "I need to come in," I said when she answered. "We have to fix this." "My office, 9 o'clock," she replied, calm as ever. "And Jeff? Bring that tablet. And your phone. Anything with location data." By 9, I was sitting in her office, the exhaustion making my eyes burn. "Vicky's playing the victim," I said. "She knows the restraining order won't stick, but that's not the point. She wants me looking unstable." Dana nodded. "That's exactly right. And we don't react. We refute. Show me your Ring app." I pulled up the footage from 2 days ago, the night Vicky claimed I'd cornered her. The timestamp read 8:13 p.m., showing me alone on the sofa, eating leftover pasta while scrolling through my phone. The front door opened and closed as Vicky left in workout gear. "Where were you after this?" Dana asked. I scrolled through my email. "I ran to Walgreens for allergy medicine. I have the receipt." The pharmacy receipt showed a purchase at 9:04 p.m., clear evidence I wasn't home threatening Vicky. "And after that?" "I went to Luke's to watch the game. Got there around 9:30. Dana nodded. "We need a statement from Luke. And let's check if any neighbors might have seen or heard anything." I thought for a moment. "Mrs. Patel. She sits on her porch every evening, weather permitting. If Vicky was outside on the phone..." Dana made the call. Mrs. Patel agreed to meet us that afternoon. We sat in Mrs. Patel's pristine living room as she poured tea. Her bracelets clinked softly against the porcelain. "I remember that evening," she said firmly. "Your wife was on the phone, pacing on your porch, laughing." She frowned. "I don't like to involve myself, but she was speaking quite loudly." "Do you recall what she said?" Dana asked gently. Mrs. Patel's lips thinned. "Something about playing this right. That he, I assume meaning you, Jeff, would look bad to the judge." She set down her cup with a decisive clink. "It didn't sound right to me." By evening, we had Luke's written statement confirming I'd arrived at 9:30 p.m. and stayed until after midnight. We had Mrs. Patel's signed affidavit about what she'd overheard. We had my pharmacy receipt and the ring footage contradicting Vicky's timeline entirely. Back at Luke's, I sat with the folder of evidence on my lap, gripping it tighter than necessary. My phone buzzed with a text from Dana. Court tomorrow 9 a.m. Wear the Navy suit. Stay calm. Across town, I imagined Vicky texting Joseph, smug confidence that her plan was working, that she'd painted me as the unstable one, that the judge would see what she wanted them to see. She didn't know what was coming. I straightened my navy tie in the courthouse bathroom mirror, trying to steady my hands. The reflection staring back looked older somehow, deeper lines around the eyes, a tightness in the jaw that hadn't been there 6 months ago. I splashed cold water on my face and checked my watch. 8:45. Dana was waiting in the hallway, her leather portfolio tucked under her arm. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." We entered courtroom 3 and took our seats at the respondents' table. The room smelled like furniture polish and anxiety. I kept my eyes forward when the door opened and Vicky walked in with Kurt trailing behind her. She'd dressed for the part. Simple blouse, minimal makeup, hair pulled back like she was too frightened to care about appearances. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Halston entered. The hearing on the temporary restraining order began with procedural matters, case numbers, appearances, exhibits marked for identification. Then the judge nodded to Kurt. "Your Honor, we'd like to call Victoria Baker to the stand." Vicky walked to the witness box with small, measured steps. After being sworn in, she settled into the chair, hands folded in her lap like a schoolgirl. Kurt approached with practiced concern on his face. "Ms. Baker, can you tell the court what happened on the evening of March 17th? Vicky's voice trembled right on cue. "I was at home. Jeff came back from being out somewhere. He seemed different, angry." "Different how?" Kurt prompted. "His eyes." She looked down. "He gets this look when he's about to explode." I felt my jaw tighten. Dana touched my arm lightly, a reminder to keep my face neutral. "What happened next?" Kurt asked. Vicky's voice quivered. "He cornered me in the kitchen. Said I'd regret what I'd done, that he'd make sure I had nothing when this was over." She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I'm afraid of what he might do." "Did you feel your safety was in jeopardy?" "Yes." She raised her eyes to the judge. "I'm afraid to be in the same house with him." I stared at my hands on the table, knuckles white. The performance was so convincing I almost wondered if I was watching some alternate reality where her version was true. When Dana rose for cross-examination, her steps were unhurried. She opened her laptop and connected it to the courtroom monitor. "Ms. Baker, you testified that my client confronted you in the kitchen around 8:30 p.m. on March 17th, correct?" "Yes," Vicky said firmly. "I'd like to show Exhibit R1, Your Honor." The screen flickered to life with the ring footage. Timestamp, 8:13 p.m., March the 17th. There I was, alone on the sofa in sweats, eating pasta from a bowl, scrolling through my phone. Then the front door opened, and Vicky walked out in leggings and a workout top, gym bag over her shoulder. "Objection!" Kurt was on his feet. "This footage hasn't been authenticated." "Your Honor, we have certification from Ring on the timestamp integrity," Dana countered, "and Ms. Baker's own cell phone location data will confirm she wasn't home at the time she claims." "Overruled," Judge Halston said. "Continue, counselor." Dana turned back to Vicky. "Ms. Baker, is that you leaving the house at 8:13 p.m. on the night in question?" Vicky's face had gone rigid. That could be any night. The metadata says otherwise." Dana pulled up a split screen. "And here's the pharmacy receipt showing Mr. Baker was purchasing allergy medication at 9:04 p.m. And here's his friend Luke's sworn statement that Mr. Baker arrived at his apartment by 9:30 to watch basketball." The courtroom fell silent. I watched Vicky's facade crack, just a hairline fracture at first, then spreading across her face as she realized her lie was collapsing. "Do you still claim you were home and in fear at 8:30 p.m.?" Dana asked. Vicky's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Kurt, who was studying papers on his table with sudden interest. Judge Halston leaned forward, his expression hardened. "Ms. Baker, false statements to this court are serious. Perjury carries significant penalties." "I may have been confused about the timing," Vicky said weakly. "Confused," Dana repeated. "Just as you were confused when you told your neighbor," she held up Mrs. Patel's affidavit, "that you were playing this right to make Mr. Baker look bad to the judge." The rest unfolded like I was watching from a distance. The judge dissolved the restraining order. Temporary possession of the house flipped to me. Vicky was restricted from accessing joint funds until final settlement. Kurt stared at the table, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Vicky glared at me with open hatred, the mask completely gone now. As we gathered our things to leave, Dana whispered, "Well done. Stay calm if she approaches you." I nodded, my throat too tight for words. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Vicky broke away from Kurt and intercepted me. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. "Jeff, please," she whispered urgently. "We can fix this. I was lonely. Joseph is nothing." I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I'd shared a bed with for 8 years. The woman who had laughed about me being too stupid to notice her betrayal. The woman who had tried to paint me as dangerous to save herself. "Jeff?" she prompted, her hand reaching toward mine. "You burned our house," I said evenly, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm just making sure you can't sell the ashes." Her face contorted. "You're cruel." "I'm accurate," I replied. "And I'm done." I stepped around her, feeling her eyes on my back as I walked toward the elevator. Dana was waiting for me, holding the door. As we descended, I let out a long breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "You handled that well," Dana said. I nodded, too drained for words. The victory felt hollow somehow, not because I regretted it, but because I couldn't believe how far we'd fallen. There was a time when I'd have taken a bullet for that woman. Now I was just relieved to have legal distance between us. The drive home, my home now, legally and temporarily, was quiet. I pulled into the driveway and sat there, staring at the front door with its seasonal wreath that Vicky had picked out. Somehow, it looked like it belonged to someone else's life. One day at a time, I told myself, pocketing my keys. I'd barely settled back in when Dana called with an update. Hector's reports had done more damage than we'd anticipated. The judge had ordered the credit union account frozen, and Joseph's name was all over it. "What does that mean for him?" I asked. "It means his funds are locked until this is resolved," Dana explained. "And since he's not a party to the divorce, he can't even contest it directly. Remember when you were a kid and thought quicksand was going to be a bigger problem in life? Turns out, financial quicksand is the real threat, especially when you've built it yourself." 3 days later, the consequences hit Joseph like a freight train. I heard it from Luke's girlfriend, Melissa, who worked at the same company. Joseph had stormed into the office that afternoon, his face flushed with anger. He'd cornered Vicky by the coffee station, demanding she fix it. "My account is frozen," he'd shouted, loud enough for half the floor to hear. "I can't pay my rent." Vicky had tried to quiet him. "Joseph, not here." "You said this would work!" "You said he'd never find out." By this point, HR had appeared. Melissa said you could have heard a pin drop as Joseph continued his tirade, unaware he was digging his grave deeper with every word. "We've been planning this for months," he'd ranted. "Now I'm broke, and it's your fault." They were escorted to separate conference rooms. By the end of the day, both were placed on administrative leave pending investigation for misuse of company resources. I sat at my kitchen table when Melissa called with the update, a strange feeling washing over me. Not exactly satisfaction, more like witnessing karma unfold in real time. A week later, Hector confirmed what I'd suspected. Both Vicky and Joseph were under formal investigation. The company had pulled their emails, finding dozens of exchanges planning trips on company time, using the corporate card for business dinners that were anything but business. Joseph lost his job first. Vicky followed 3 days later. Hector sent me one last photo, Joseph standing in the office parking lot, face crimson with rage as he stared at the cardboard box in his hands. Vicky stood a few feet away, her back turned, shoulders hunched in shame. Their grand plan had imploded spectacularly. I studied the image, trying to feel triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. These were the people who had conspired to ruin me, who had laughed at my trust, stolen my money, tried to take my home. Now they stood in a parking lot, their careers in shambles, their relationship fracturing under pressure. I closed my laptop and walked to the window. The neighborhood was quiet, late afternoon sun slanting across my lawn. Our lawn. My lawn now. In the stillness, I realized something important. I didn't need to watch them fall apart. I just needed to rebuild. As I turned away from the window, my phone buzzed with a text from Dana. "Final settlement conference scheduled. 3 weeks." The end was finally in sight. 6 weeks crawled by with a mixture of paperwork, meetings with Dana, and quiet evenings alone in the house. Each day that passed felt like one step closer to resolution, but time has a way of stretching when you're waiting for something important. The morning of the final settlement hearing, I woke before my alarm. I'd slept maybe 3 hours total, my mind racing with potential scenarios. What if Vicky had found some new angle? What if the judge changed his mind? Fear has a way of magnifying in the dark hours before dawn. I showered, shaved carefully, and put on the navy suit Dana had suggested. Professional, but not flashy, she'd said. We want the judge to see stability. The courthouse loomed over the street, all limestone and purpose. I'd been here enough times now that the security guards recognized me with a nod. One of them, an older guy with salt and pepper hair, gave me a discreet thumbs up. Amazing how strangers pick sides in other people's battles. Dana met me in the hallway, perfectly composed in a charcoal pantsuit. She carried her trademark burgundy portfolio, the one that had held all the evidence that changed the trajectory of my life. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be, I replied. We entered courtroom C together. Vicky was already seated at the opposite table with Kurt, who looked less cocky than during our previous encounters. Vicky wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back severely. She didn't look up when we walked in. I remember staring at her profile, searching for some remnant of the woman I'd married, some flicker of the person who'd once held my hand through my father's heart surgery, or who'd danced with me in our empty living room the day we closed on the house. There was nothing familiar left, just the sharp outline of a stranger wearing my wife's face. The bailiff called the room to order, and Judge Halston entered. He was a no-nonsense man with reading glasses perpetually perched on the end of his nose. Let's proceed with Baker versus Baker, he said, settling into his chair. Dana rose first. Your Honor, we've prepared a final settlement proposal that addresses the court's previous concerns while providing equitable division of assets. She approached the bench with copies for everyone. I watched Kurt flip through the pages, his expression neutral. Vicky kept her eyes fixed on the table. Judge Halston reviewed the document carefully. Counsel for the respondent, any objections to these terms? Kurt stood. Your Honor, we've reviewed the proposal. While my client maintains her position regarding certain circumstances, we acknowledge the court's previous findings and— He paused, glancing at Vicky. We accept the terms as presented. A ripple of surprise went through me. No fight? No last-minute drama? It felt almost anticlimactic after everything we'd been through. Judge Halston nodded. Very well. Let's review the key provisions for the record. For the next 30 minutes, he methodically outlined what Dana and I had worked so hard to secure. The house would remain mine, with a timeline to buy out Vicky's share at market value, minus the funds she'd diverted to the secret account with Joseph. I would retain my retirement accounts intact. The joint savings would be divided, but weighted to compensate for the bad faith withdrawals Vicky had made. Most satisfying was the judge's final point. Given the demonstrated bad faith and falsified statements previously made to this court, respondent will contribute to petitioner's legal fees in the amount of $20,000. Kurt winced slightly. Vicky remained stone-faced. When the judge asked if we understood and accepted the terms, I said, yes, Your Honor, clearly. Vicky's response was barely audible. The scratch of the judge's pen as he signed the decree seemed impossibly loud in the quiet courtroom. Then it was done. We were officially divorced. Dana squeezed my arm briefly. Congratulations, she whispered. As we stood to leave, Vicky finally looked at me. Her eyes were empty, almost hollow. For a split second, I thought she might say something, but she turned away. Outside the courtroom, Dana handed me my copy of the settlement. It's over, Jeff. You did it. I thanked her for everything, and we parted ways in the lobby. I pushed through the heavy doors of the courthouse and stepped into the bright afternoon sun. The papers in my hand felt strangely heavy, heavier somehow than all the betrayal that had led to them. 3 months after the final court date, I stood in my garage on a Saturday morning, putting the finishing touches on a set of pine shelves I'd built against the back wall. The fresh-cut wood smell reminded me of weekend projects with my dad when I was a kid. I ran my hand over the smooth surface, satisfied with how level they were. Tools had their place again, order from chaos. It's funny how time works after something breaks. Those first weeks after the divorce felt like swimming through mud, each day stretching endlessly. Then suddenly 3 months had passed, and I found myself building things instead of just holding the pieces. The house felt different now, quieter, but not in that tense, waiting for the other shoe to drop way. Just peaceful. That morning, I'd finally fixed the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, the one Vicky had complained about for months, but we'd never gotten around to. Turns out it was just a worn-out washer. 10 minutes and done. I walked back inside, wiping sawdust from my hands. Friday nights had become my favorite part of the week. No discussions about whose turn it was to pick a restaurant, no compromising on movies neither of us really wanted to watch. Just me, a pizza from Angelo's, the place Vicky always said was too greasy, and whatever film I felt like streaming. Last night it was an action movie with explosions and a plot you could drive a truck through. I enjoyed every minute of it. My phone buzzed with a text from Luke. "Fish are biting at Cedar Creek. Picking you up at 6 tomorrow?" I smiled and sent back a thumbs up. Weekends had rhythm again. Sometimes fishing with Luke, sometimes helping my dad with his vegetable garden, or just having coffee with my mom at their kitchen table. Diane had gotten into the habit of sending me home with containers of homemade soup or casseroles. Not because I couldn't cook for myself, but because that's how she showed love. "You're looking better," she'd told me last Sunday, patting my cheek the way she did when I was 10. Starting to see my boy again. I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd buried, trying to keep my marriage intact. From what I heard through mutual acquaintances, Vicky's life had contracted dramatically. She was renting a small apartment off the freeway, the kind of place she used to turn her nose up at. Her hours at the new job were irregular, some retail position that paid far less than her corporate salary. Pearl and Celeste had scattered like roaches when the money and status disappeared. Funny how that works. They didn't answer her calls anymore. The last time anyone mentioned her name at a neighborhood barbecue, the conversation went quiet, then quickly changed direction. Joseph fared worse. His name had become toxic in professional circles. The scandal had followed him. Details of the affair, the misappropriated funds, the frozen account that imploded his finances. Last I heard, he was working temp jobs 2 towns over, his LinkedIn profile like a ghost town. The easy ride he thought he'd found with Vicky had vanished the moment consequences arrived. People ask if I regret not exploding that first night in the hallway when I heard her voice on the speaker. I don't. Staying silent gave me the map. The confrontation in our kitchen the next morning put the truth on the record. Everything after, Dana's meticulous legal work, Hector's surveillance, the evidence binder, made sure that truth had teeth. Sometimes when I'm washing dishes at the sink and looking out at the backyard, I wonder about alternate universes where I did storm into that room, where I screamed and broke things and gave her the emotional ammunition she needed. In those universes, I'm probably the one in the apartment off the freeway. You know what's strange? I don't hate her anymore. I don't feel much of anything toward her. The marriage wasn't what I thought it was, and now it's gone. Simple as that. Vicky's life now is noise without structure. Joseph's is worse, a ghost of the man who thought betrayal came cheap. Mine is steady, a roof that's mine, a calendar that makes sense, mornings where I can breathe. Justice didn't arrive as fireworks. It arrived as keys in my hand and silence where betrayal used to be. That's revenge you can live with. I looked around my garage at the completed shelves, turned off the light, and walked back into my house. I locked the door behind me, not out of fear, but out of choice. My home was secure. My life was my own again. Peace isn't just the absence of conflict. It's something you choose, deliberately, day after day. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.